Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to be discussing being a Christian and watching movies. A lot of what I'm going to say can be applied to stories in general, but I'd like to focus mostly on the cinematic experience. There will be some overlap though. Unlike video games, which I discussed in a previous video, we don't generally have an issue with movie watching addictions. I think it is important to be aware of how frequently you are interacting with the medium, but for the most part, addiction isn't something I'm going to be discussing because I don't see it as too much of an issue. I'm also not going to be discussing how to interact with mature content or adult content. I think it's important to be aware of what influences your mindset. And if you feel like something is affecting your headspace in some way, whether that is sexual content or language or violence, just be aware of that. And if something is affecting you in a negative way, then take a step back. But because it's such a nuanced issue, I think that's something that we have to discern for ourselves how to interact with. So I'm going to talk us through certain pitfalls that we can find ourselves facing when watching movies. And then I'm going to suggest a few tips for improving our relationship with the cinematic experience. So the first pitfall to really be aware of is living vicariously. One of the issues that I think is most frequent, yet least commonly known, is the issue of living vicariously. We've all been in that moment of watching a scene and feeling as if we're there, taking on the characters' experiences as if they were our own. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having an emotional connection to a story. In fact, that's a good thing because it increases our capacity for empathy. It also increases our ability to empathize with other people and other stories that might not be our own. That being said, it's important to remember that stories cannot replace the value of living life. Regardless of how exciting that moment of sacrifice was, or how romantic that dramatic kiss was, the truth is, it wasn't yours and it's not mine. I think it's important to remember that because it's easy to take on experiences that take place in stories as if they were our own, when the truth is, we're robbing ourselves of the ability to experience life as it is. And we're taking on something that isn't actually real as if it was. And that's disingenuous to our ability to have and experience life. This is one of my greatest struggles when it comes to watching movies or even playing games and reading books. I find myself getting so attached to a character or to a story that the change in story can have an impact on my mood and how I'm feeling. And again, it's good to have an emotional connection because sometimes that can be an outlet for feelings and emotions. That being said, if my connection to a story is so great that it is dictating how I feel, then in a way it has become my master. And it's important for me to be aware of when that's taking place so that I can take a step back and remember why I'm watching the movie to begin with. I also think it's important to be aware of what it is in me that is feeling that emotional connection. If there's some lack or something that I am not experiencing that a part of me is longing to feel, then it's important for me to be aware of what that thing is so that I can live my life accordingly and I can make changes in reality to feel those things and to change my action so that there isn't such a void. I recently listened to an episode of Hidden Brain by NPR. It's a podcast that I highly recommend, and in the episode they discussed how our society has shifted to living vicariously through various media, such as watching videos. I think we can also apply this concept to watching movies. So if you're looking for more of a discussion on living vicariously and when it's important to step back from that in various aspects of our life, I recommend checking that out. Don't do it. Don't do it. No, no, no. I love this movie so much. I don't know why. I watch it 3 times a day at 3, 6, and 9 p.m. But it's so good. It's so good. The second pitfall to be aware of is it's just a movie fallacy. The opposite of over-engagement, which I just discussed, is disengagement entirely. And I think that is the wrong approach. It's not uncommon for us to say, oh, it's just a movie, and turn our brains off, just taking it all in. And if something catches our eye, then it's a good movie. And if something doesn't catch our eye, then it isn't. I'm generalizing here. But what I'm trying to say is that we're doing ourselves a disservice to ignore the heart of movies, which is their stories. Stories are, I would argue, our greatest way to communicate virtue, vice, and perspective. And movies are one of the greatest ways to communicate all 3 of those things. For that reason, every movie, and I mean that literally, every single movie is communicating some sort of virtue, vice, and perspective. It is giving us a look into the way someone sees the world. And for that reason, I think it's a great opportunity to consider what someone is trying to say. I'll even take it a step further. I believe that there's a divine truth that is apparent in every person, some revelation of who God is and who He created humanity to be. And because that is apparent and evident in every person, it is also made known through every person's perspective. And in some way, we can find God, we can find His truth in every single movie that we see. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. Sin and its effect on the human experience is universally apparent across all of humanity. And because of this, when we watch a movie, we are seeing someone's interaction and experience with sin. We are seeing the effects that has had on their life and what they interpret that to mean. They most likely won't use that terminology because Hollywood isn't known for Christian principles or ways of thinking. But that doesn't mean that the truth that is apparent in all of us is not also there. So I would encourage you to look for that, to consider what each movie is saying when you watch it, because it probably applies to your life in more ways than you recognize.
Yeah?
Hello, brother. I have something very important to show you. Are you doing anything?
Yeah, I'm pretty busy right
Brother,
now.
I'm sorry, but this is far more important. I have something to show you.
Okay, what is it?
Justice League. Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen Justice League. It's a pretty bad movie.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to not ever say something like that again. But more importantly, you need to rewatch this film.
Look, I'm busy, I've got stuff to do, I really don't want to.
Clearly do not understand the complexities of this cinematic masterpiece. I really think you should watch this film. Right now.
Alright.
That brings us to the third point, putting up walls. Countless proverbs instruct us to listen to the wisdom and the voices of others. Jesus teaches, almost above everything else, to empathize and to put the needs of others above our own. I believe that this is most effectively achieved when we listen to the voices of others. And I also believe that cinema is one of the greatest ways that we have to participate in this experience. What I mean is that when we watch a movie, like I said, we have the ability to hear someone else's voice. but beyond that, we have an opportunity to empathize with that person. The problem is when we limit the voices that we are listening to only those we agree with. I'll let you in on a secret. It is possible to watch a movie that shares a perspective you disagree with. In fact, as a Christian, I think that's probably a good thing. It's important to have conversations, discussing various sides of an argument, but it's also important to just listen. And there is no better place to listen than watching movies, because in all honesty, it is one-sided. And at first, that might make you a bit uncomfortable. And that's okay. When you are watching a movie, there is not a space or an opportunity for which you can share your opinion. And there isn't supposed to be. It is just an opportunity for you to hear and for you to listen. And that, in turn, creates empathy. So I would encourage you to listen to as many voices as you can and watch as many movies sharing those voices as you can, because that is going to widen the range of perspectives which is available to you. And in turn, I hope that it will allow us to soften our hearts, to hear what others have to say, and to really live our lives differently, considering how we have an ability to influence those around us.
Wait, there are apes in this movie? I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I'll just skip this one.
So here are some final tips to wrap up. Consider what each movie you watch is saying. Consider whose voice it is sharing. Consider which voices you are listening to. Remember, most stories are not about you, but their truths can apply to you. They aren't intended to shut you down or ignore your voice. Instead, they're intended to share their own. Ask yourself what lessons you can learn from the stories that movies are sharing with you. And finally, remember to step back and live your life. Don't try to live someone else's, because you'll be left feeling empty. Their story, it's not yours, and that's okay. You were created to be you and no one else. So make sure to live your story and share that too. But first, listen to the stories of others. I hope this video has been helpful for you and maybe has shared a different perspective on how we as Christians can interact with the cinematic experience. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.